Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The June 18th, 2025 meeting of the Board of Estimates is now called to order. The board continues to meet in a hybrid format. For those here in person, please take a moment to silence your cell phones and other electronic devices. For those attending virtually, if you desire an opportunity to speak, we ask that you please keep yourself on mute until the chair recognizes you. When you are called upon, please announce your name and organization and speak loudly and clearly as you present. At this time, I would ask Clerk Celeste Amato for any corrections, additions, and noted abstentions for today's agenda. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, everyone. Bear with us as we get ourselves organized for this last meeting of the fiscal year. Woo! Shout out for that. That's okay. That's all good. Woohoo! There'll be another one in 2 weeks. Don't worry. It's like the mail. It just keeps coming. Good morning again, everyone, and I have a few items to share this morning as part of the opening statement. We do have a correction this morning. For SB 25-11946, we are deleting the following language from the background explanation. Metra Industries Incorporated, 50 Muller Place, Little Falls, New Jersey, 07424, $52,700,000. This item is being deleted again from SB 25-11946. We also have a few walk-ons at this last meeting of the year, and those items are as follows. SB 25-11812, this is for the Department of Housing. It's a grant agreement with Harbor West Collaborative Affordable Housing Land Trust, LLC, for $100,000. This item is being walked on at the request of the agency, and the action is to approve a subrecipient grant agreement with Harbor West Collaborative Affordable Housing Land Trust, LLC. We also have SB 25-12133. This is a procurement item. It's an award, a sole source for the Jaws of Life. It's for $53,792, and this is being walked on at the request of the agency. And that action is to approve a goods and services contract award, sole source, to Municipal Emergency Services, Inc., and again, that is for the item Jaws of Life. SB 25-11900 for the Department of Planning. This is a grant agreement with the Maryland Department of Agriculture for the Maryland Money Nutrition Incentives Grant. The dollar amount is $100,446. And again, the board action is to approve this grant agreement, and this is walked on at the request of the agency. And finally, SB 25-11315 for the Office of the Mayor. This is a second amendment to the master agreement with Fuse Corps, and this is in the dollar amount of $20,000. And again, the board action is to approve a second amendment to the agreement with Fuse Corps. We have the following deferrals to note today. SB 25-11425, DPW Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority Agreement for $30 million. This item is being deferred until July 2nd, 2025, at the request of the Comptroller. SB 25-11910 for the Bureau of Procurement. This is a sixth extension to contract B 504568, providing various rental vehicles with multiple vendors. This item is deferred until July 16th at the request of the Comptroller. SB 25-11622, MR Educational Grants for Fiscal 24 Financial Plan from Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund. This item is deferred until July 16th at the request of the President. SB 25-11681 for the Comptroller's Office resolution of the Board of Estimates establishing minimum health care requirements. This item is being deferred until July 16th at the request of the administration. We have no withdrawals to note this morning. We did receive a statement of opposition related to SB 25-11946. This is for the Department of Public Works pre-qualification of contractors. This statement was received from John C. Murphy on behalf of Economic International Construction Company, Inc. The following items are going to appear on the non-routine agenda this morning. SB 25-11761 for the Department of Audits, a biennial performance audit for the Baltimore City Health Department. This is for fiscal years ending June 30, 2023 and June 30, 2022. SB 25-11923 for the Law Department Settlement Agreement and Release for David Morris in the amount of $375,000. SB 25-12013 Law Department Settlement and Funding Agreement, Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners for $9,140,000. SB 25-11555, MR Educational Grants Annual Report, Baltimore Civic Fund. SB 25-12066, from the Office of the Labor Commissioner, creation of new union code for Pratt Workers United, AFSCME Council 3 employees. SB 25-11946 for the Department of Public Works, pre-qualification of contractors. Again, this is on the non-routine because we received a statement of opposition from John C. Murphy on behalf of Economic International Construction Company, Inc. SB 25-11812 for the Department of Housing. This is a grant agreement with Harbor West Collaborative Affordable Housing Land Trust for $100,000. This is on the non-routine because it was a walk-on item. SB 25-12133 for procurement award sole source Jaws of Life Municipal Emergency Services, again on the non-routine because it's a walk-on item. SB 25-11900 for the Department of Planning grant agreement with Maryland Department of Agriculture, Maryland Market Money Nutrition Incentives Grant for $100,446. Again, a walk-on item, and so it's on the non-routine. And finally, again, a walk-on that is going to be on the non-routine for that reason. SB 25-11315 for the Office of the Mayor, Amendment 2 to the Master Agreement with Fuse Corps for $20,000. We have the following abstentions to note this morning. The Honorable President Zeke Cohen has no abstentions to note. The Honorable Comptroller Bill Henry is abstaining on all travel requests and travel reimbursements. City Solicitor Ebony Thompson has no abstentions to note this morning. The Director of Public Works, Khalil Zaid, has no abstentions to note this morning. And our City Administrator, Faith Leach, has no abstentions to note this morning. There are also no votes on the routine agenda this morning. And if the board would indulge me, at the end of every fiscal year, I'd like to thank the folks in our office who make this agenda happen twice a month, every month, all year long. If we ever sound a little cranky when you call us, that might be why. It just never stops. I want to thank Jerry Lynn Saunders, who manages our IT and systems, Casey Kelleher, the Deputy Chief of Staff, Carla Winchester with our contract compliance group, formerly known as pre-audits. And last but not least, Ms. Audrey Quarles, who is our BOE Operations Director and affectionately known in our office as the General. Thank you all for the work you do all year long to make this happen on time, all the time. And thank you, Mr. President and Board.
And I want to thank you, Madam Clerk, for your exceptional clerkship. It is a pleasure getting to work with you, and just appreciate how you keep all of us on track, every single Board of Estimates. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
With that, I will ask for a motion to approve and adopt the opening statement as read by the clerk.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The opening statement has been adopted. I also want to recognize, where'd she go? There she is. My colleague, Councilmember Odette Ramos from the 14th District. Thank you for being here, as well as Delegate Stephanie Smith. Appreciate you. And also Deputy Planning Director. At this time, I now direct the board members' attention to the memorandum from my office dated June 18, 2025, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items together with any corrections, additions, abstentions, and no votes that have been noted by the clerk. I will entertain a motion to approve all the items contained on the routine agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor of approving the items on the routine agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The routine agenda items have been adopted. Seeing no further questions, we will now move on to non-routine agenda. The first item on the non-routine agenda is SB 2511761 from the Department of Audits for the biennial performance audit for the Baltimore City Health Department for fiscal years ending June 30th, 2023 and June 30th, 2022. This request is to note the audit. On behalf of the audits, we have Auditor Josh Pash. Auditor Pash, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Comptroller, Madam City Administrator, honorable members of the board. My name is Josh Pash, and I am here to present the biennial performance audit of the Health Department for the process of effectiveness of controls over contracting processes for professional services and professional services and subrecipient contracts. Next slide. Next slide.
Somebody able to?
Okay.
There we go.
Today I'll be going over our audit objectives and scope, our audit methodology, background information, and our findings, and take any questions you might have. Next slide. Our audit objective and scope. Our objective was to assess the effectiveness of controls over the contracting process for professional services and grant recipients, and also to follow up on the prior year findings recommendations that were included in the previous biennial report dated December 20th, 2022, and the fiscal years under audit were 23 and 22. Next slide. The two risks that we were looking at were operational risk and contractual risk. Next slide. Audit methodology. So what we did for this audit was we conducted interviews and walkthroughs with key personnel from the health department to understand the contract approval process and to evaluate risks and controls. We'll have findings related to that in finding 1. Second, we analyzed the health department's tracker for fiscal years 23 and 22, and that tracker logs all contracts, and we looked at it to show timeliness when a contract was initiated, processed, and approved. We randomly selected 30 samples from the populations of professional and subrecipient contracts for fiscal year 23 and 22, and we were looking to see if the health department tracker was reliable, whether the contract approval process was efficient, and if not, what were the causes of any significant delays, and then whether the health department maintains appropriate and sufficient records to support that. We reviewed the AM Manuals 3031, expenditure authorizations, and 101-1, request for board of estimates approval. And then for our follow-up finding, reviewed the health department's policy for oversight, monitoring subrecipients and subrecipient contract risk assessment to evaluate the implementation status of the management action plans for those prior year findings. So the contract approval workflow, this was provided by the health department. We'll start with the box 2. Basically, the program director of the health department will request a scope of work and a budget from the subrecipient, and that will come from the subrecipient to the program director. Once they do their check for scope of work, this is the last box on the top row, the program account will review everything to make sure it all ties out, and then pass it on to the contract intake coordinator, who is going to add it to the log that we looked at. So here's where our audit process started, because this is where the available data was available for us to test. So the contract administrator compiles all those documents and goes and submits it to the law department, and this is where the BOE submission and approval process begins. The law department does the review, gives it back to the contract administrator, and then that goes to the Department of Audits. That's the pre-audit division, which has been transferred to the Comptroller Central Office and is now called the Office of Contract and Compliance Review. Once their review is done, goes back to the contract administrator, and then the contract administrator goes and gets all those signatures they need for submission to the BOE. It goes to the BOE approval, and that is the process to get a contract approved. Next slide. So what we're looking at is the turnaround times, the efficiency of the process. So the health department's internal turnaround time is within 7 days from the date the subrecipient or vendor returns the requested information, which is the foundation of the contractor agreement, to the program director, to the date that the contract administrator compiles all the documents and submits to the Department of Labor, which is the big chunk from the health department's internal processes. And again, that's where the data collection and recording of the tracker pretty much began, and we were able to use that analysis for our testing. So we noted that in fiscal year 24, the health department set a goal of obtaining BOE approval within 90 days, and that's from the contract administrator compiling all information to submission to the BOE. I do want to note that the 90 days was not during our audit period, and the health department has identified this as an area where they want to improve and gain more efficiency, and that was one of the goals that they had set after our audit had, before our audit had started, but after the audit period. We want to note that other agencies that are part of this BOE submission process, the SMBAD, the Department of Law, BBMR, and then the pre-audit, which is now CCR. So, more background information. Summary approved contracts, including amendments. This is to put things into context. So, in fiscal year 22, the subrecipient contracts, they had 35, and that increased to 115 in 2023. The amount of those contracts cumulative was 23.6 million or 23.7 million in 22 and 26.9 million in 23. And then for professional contracts, it went from 32 to 65 and from 11 million to 15 million. And then this is also during that period of transitioning out of COVID. Next slide. Okay. So our findings. The first finding is that the health department tracker is not effective to identify and address the contractual approval process delays, which was the goal of the audit, efficiency in that process. We noted a design flaw in the tracker. Number one, they do track when law, pre-audits, and other respective agencies complete their reviews, but it does not track when they're actually submitted to them to see how long those different agencies are taking for their review. And it also does not track the internal processing time that when the health department is working on those contracts and agreements, how long those are taking. We also noted data reliability issues. So health department does not consistently record the applicable dates. Of the 420 dates or places for dates in their tracker, 103 or 25% were not entered in the tracker. And then we also did a test of a sample of those to see which ones were correct. So we selected 120 dates, and we're able to trace 65 dates that BOE submit in the contracts. Of the 65 dates, 37 were for subrecipients, and we found no exceptions that the dates were accurate. For the professional contracts, there were 28, and we noted that 22 were incorrect when we compared it to the supporting documentation. Next slide. Okay, our result. So the health department does not have sufficient and reliable data to identify causes of delays. So of the 60 subrecipient professional contracts, 22 did not have a complete set of data points going through the process. And the 38 remaining contracts, we noted that the length of that approval process was excessive, which I will get into more detail on the next slide. And then we, like I noted before, health department has identified this, is working on that, and they have set that 90-day turnaround time, which was given to us when we began the audit, but was not in effect during our audit testing period. Okay. So processing time and delays for the selected subrecipient professional contracts. So for the subrecipient contracts, we noted the average turnaround time was 159 days. The median, which was the middle point of all the contracts, was 130 days. And then you can see the minimum and the maximum. For professional contracts, it was 146 days as the average and 142 as the median. And I want to point out that this is our analysis based on the 38 subrecipient professional contracts, that we had enough data points to do an analysis. Okay, so we looked and tried to identify the cause of this. And we noted that the health department does not clearly define those required data points for tracking and monitoring. And our recommendation is that the health department improve the tracker to include the internal health department contract review and approval process, to formally define those required data points for tracking and monitoring so they can identify the causes of those delays and use that improvement, and then also to put some automation in the tracker, including formulas, to help them quickly identify where those delays might be occurring, and then, of course, to record the data points consistently and correctly for all those contracts, and then monitor those dates for efficiency and effectiveness, identify areas where improvement can be made. The second finding was the health department's contract monitoring processes increases the financial and legal risks for the city. So the health department does not effectively monitor the existing contracts which will be expiring. They do not initiate the contract approval process before the commencement of the contract, and the start of the contract approval process was occurring after the contract start date or after the contract end date for the ones which I will list. Okay, So our analysis, we looked at 42 subrecipient and professional agreements, and we weren't able to analyze 9 of them because of data availability. And then of the remaining 33, we noted that 27 or 82%, the contract approval process started after the contract start date. And for 2 of them, the approval process that was captured on the tracker actually started after the contract end date. So to put it in a graphic view, these are contracts that started before the contract approval process. So within the first 30 days, none of the contracts. Between 31 and 60 days of the contract start date to get approval, there were 2. 60 to 90 was 5, 91 to 120 days was 4, and then over 121 days after the contract was approved and went live, did the contract approval process start based on the data we had in those trackers.
Mr. Pash, I'm going to just slow you down for one quick minute. Madam CAO, you had a question?
Yes, can we go back to that slide? Can you just clarify for me what you mean by the contract started before the contract approval process? So the date of the contract, did work begin and there was no contract in place?
That is the implication. So basically.
Okay, I just want.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, the contract went live January 1st, and then the contract approval process started on February 1st. So to get
So
the
they
contract
bought-
approved, it started a month, or as these dates show, after the contract was actually signed and effective. Not signed, the contract scope period. So the contract was, let's say, for January
it.
to December. That's when the contract period to do the work was. And to get it approved, the process to get it approved started in February, March, April.
Got it. So the scope started before the actual contract was executed, is what happened.
I think he's saying it's worse than that. It's
Are these the, what do we call them when they come to the board?
retroactive.
Yeah, maybe I'm
Yeah.
thinking about the retros.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll save my questions.
Okay. Okay, so results, effect. So having services provided without a legally executed contract increases legal and financial risks to the city. If there's a dispute between the city and the grant and the subrecipient or the vendor, we don't have an executed contract to create a legally binding relationship to be enforced. And then also for grant funding, the city could lose grant funds if the expenditures are not within the period of performance. And we did note that some instances where the city will actually retroactively reimburse the cost which occurred before the contract sign date, which was during the period the contract was the scope of the contract, but when the contract was not legally effective. And so if the payments are made after the grant scope period, they can be denied. And then also, the BOE process is part of the process for getting work tags, which is the workday financial account, general ledger account, to be able to post stuff. And so if those work tags are delayed because of BOE approval, then that would delay payments to the vendors and subrecipients to get reimbursed. And then that has been noted prior, potentially causing financial hardship on our subrecipients and vendors.
Hey, Josh, I'm going to
Yep.
stop you right there in sort of the same line, which is in that kind of situation, like, what are the checks in place to stop that from happening? What is obviously it is the city agency's responsibility to both like not do that, but also to flag it when it's happening. But I guess, how does that, and you know, maybe I'm beating you to the punch here, but like, what are the mechanisms that are in place to stop whatever is occurring so that we can get clear and make sure the timeline makes sense and that the contract is signed before scope of work and all that? Like, I know it's the department's responsibility, but who else's responsibility is it?
Right, so only the department is going to know when they need to let a contract and when they're going to start that contract approval process. So getting the information to put the contract together, running it through the BOE submission process. No one else is going to have like that timeline when an agency wants a contract, needs a contract. So the part of this audit was basically looking at the health department's internal controls over that. And part of this recommendation is going to be is for the health department to put in place that monitoring of when contracts are going to end so that they can be started, or the process of actually getting them let can be started earlier so that there's not that gap.
Yeah, totally understand that. But I guess what I'm asking is like, is there any, in that kind of situation, is there any flag that goes up to finance, to the city administrator? Like, like is it, or is it just literally this is between the agency and the vendor?
Right. So basically, any flag like that would be retrospective. So when it comes to the board, it would be identified that the contract scope period has already started.
Okay.
The other agencies in the process would be, law, SMBAD, and pre-audits. But that's already after. That's not a preemptive or a something to catch it ahead of time. That would be after the whole process started. So basically, it falls completely within the agency, no matter what agency it is.
Okay.
I'd like to add, just support.
Director?
Yes, this is something that is in the past used to be called like a verbal notice to proceed, which is not an actual legal thing. So, so it's the agency will give the contractor at some point say, hey, go ahead, and the contract is in place. In reality, obviously, until the Board of Estimate approve the contract, it's not legally binding.
But like, that's not good, right? I mean, like,
Of course not. Yeah.
just so
of
we're
course
all
not.
clear here,
Absolutely.
like-
Yeah.
I can actually hear the city solicitor cringing on the other side.
Absolutely.
yeah, like, a go-ahead that is verbal, that is in contradiction to the way a contract's supposed to work is,
Absolutely,
okay. All right, I'm seeing the city administrator. You good?
We can save it,
Okay,
the discussion.
noted. All right, Mr. Pash?
Right. So related to Director Zayed, we didn't actually look at, but we also didn't note where the work was delayed, which kind of leads to the whole, like, the financial hardship on the vendors and also working outside the legal binding contract. Okay, so for the criteria, we looked at the admin manual 3031, which says that any contracts over $25,000 have to come to the Board of Estimates, and then the admin manual 101-1, which was getting Board of Estimates approval, and that says that prior to the execution or effective date of the requested action, it should be approved by the BOE. So that's the city policy, and I also mentioned, the risk with federal regulations. Next slide. So our recommendation here is that the health department monitor existing contract expiration dates to allow sufficient time to start a replacement contract and then to comply with those administrative manuals. Should I pause for more questions? Okay. So we also looked at the implementation status of prior year findings. The prior objective was to determine whether the health department has effective monitoring controls over subrecipients to comply with federal and Maryland state regulations to make sure that basically for the subrecipients are complying with the grant rules. The prior condition, which was the finding, was that the health department internal control system over monitoring is not structured to provide effective monitoring of subrecipients. For example, monitoring of single audit reporting, the follow-up, desk reviews, et cetera. So we looked into what the causes were. This is the previous audit. So the health department did not have formal policies and procedures for subrecipient monitoring, and they did have a drafted policy, and it was not complete at that time. And then the health department did not perform risk assessments of subrecipients, which is required by federal regulations. That was also brought up in the presentation of the single audit as a citywide issue. And then the health department had drafted a risk assessment template for subrecipient monitoring, but it was not complete at the time of that audit for the prior year. So the prior year recommendation was to implement those draft policy and procedures to address the observations we did in that audit. The prior year management action plan had 5 different action plans to address the findings and recommendations. When we did the follow-up, 1 was implemented, 2 were partially implemented, and 2 were not implemented. Next slide. Okay, the one that was implemented was they were going to hire a grant compliance analyst and grant compliance manager, and they had done that. The contract intake memo had been updated to include a process to identify if a vendor was a subrecipient and a contractor, which was one of those roles that the grant contract analyst was going to shore up. And then, so when subrecipients are identified, they have a compliance team will reach out to program staff to discuss the plan for subrecipient monitoring. For partially implemented subrecipient oversight, the policies and procedures for subrecipient oversight were still in draft stage when we did the follow-up, and the risk assessment and comprehensive monitoring schedule had not been completed, including on-site site reviews, desk audits, and other monitoring requirements. And then for the not implemented, the risk assessment tool was not implemented during our audit scope, and the smart sheet, which the audit for this year was looking at, had been established, but as I noted earlier, the design was not effective, and that goes back to the findings 1 and 2. And then I will take any questions.
I'm going to probably ask this of the director after, but do you know off the top what percent of the health department's budget is grants, subgranted? Like, just trying to understand. I know that this is an agency that has a lot of grants going on at all times. So do you know in total the dollars or the percents?
So we didn't look at the revenue stream,
Okay.
so I don't have like the grants that they're awarded. What we did note is that basically in those 2 fiscal years, it was between 24 and 26 million of the value of those subrecipient contracts.
23 or 24 million was the value of subrecipient contracts.
Right, and so fiscal year 22, it was 23.7 million, and in fiscal year 23, it was 27 million.
Okay.
And that was using grant funds to pass through to subrecipients.
Got it. All right. I'm a Director B, forewarned. I'm going to ask you what total percent that constitutes of the agency's budget. I'm going to make an assumption here, though, and say it's a lot, right? I mean, this is an agency that more than most engages in granting, subgranting, contracting, and that many of the services provided are done in partnership with vendors.
There is a lot. I do not know what percentage of their budget falls into that category, though.
Okay. I believe it's a lot. I ask that in part just because I think it's really, really important that for an agency that is transacting in this way, that these fiscal controls be much, much tighter. And I would imagine that when there is that kind of looseness, that it could not only impact the credibility of the agency, but also the ability of the vendor to pay their own bills. If the timeline is not clear, if there's challenges with the execution of the grant, I would just imagine not every vendor is a multi-million-dollar huge for or nonprofit organization. So I would just think that it could really have a negative impact and then reputationally damage the city.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Comptroller?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a question for clarification. This was, the scope of this audit was fiscal years 22 and 23.
Correct.
So all of the information being reviewed, the most current information in what we were reviewing for this audit was as of June 30th, 2023.
Correct.
Right. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of the openness and transparency that these kind of audits encourage, and I respect the scrutiny that the board is giving. I just want to make sure everyone is conscious of the fact that because the mayor and city council a decade plus ago compromised on how much they were willing to fund our ability to check in on agencies, we do biennial audits, which means we do 2 years at a time with some distance. And so we are not really, with our audits, showing where we are. We are showing where we were, and we can look at larger trends. But I don't want people to get too focused on what are clearly problematic issues identified in this audit as if all of it is current and that no progress has been made in the last 2 years, because that's the next part of the presentation.
Right. So I do want to say that as we're doing an audit, if an agency comes up and says, we fixed all this stuff in, November of '24, we do take that into consideration and would not put something in here typically that says, okay, this was, an issue in '23, but is no longer an issue in, let's say, the end of calendar year '24. If it was fixed in, March of '25, then it probably would still be in here because we don't have time to check on that. But that being said, there are oftentimes movement and improvement on this after the audit date, but these would still be applicable findings.
No, point well made. This is a moment in time. This is not where we currently are, but past this prologue, I think it's, nevertheless, this is important to, thank you. Nevertheless, I think it's important to acknowledge the specific challenges that were happening in this period that you captured. So thank you. Any other questions for the auditor from the board? Hearing and seeing none, I would thank you, Auditor Pash, and invite the agency, I believe Director Mary Beth, come on up.
Good morning.
Turn it back on. And down.
Good morning, honorable members of the board. My name is Mary Beth Haller, and I'm the Interim Commissioner of Health for Baltimore City. With me this morning, I have Kelly Eastman, the Health Department Chief of Staff, and Unyeme Ekpa, who is our Chief Financial Officer. I want to take a moment to thank the audit team for their careful and thorough review of all of our records. We look forward to further improvement and further conversation with the team. Now I would like to invite BCHD's Chief Financial Officer, Unyeme Ekpa, for our agency presentation. She will walk us through those details.
All right, good morning, honorable members of the board. My name is Unyeme Ekpa. I'm the Chief of Finance at the Health Department. I would like to start off by saying that we were excited when the audit department gave us a chance to choose a topic, and we chose this topic because we wanted this issue to be brought out for everyone to see. So, but quickly, next slide, please. Going to just walk through some of the things we've done, but I'll start off with the summary of the findings, the root causes of this delay, the internal improvements we've made to date. I'm excited about that. The outcomes of those improvements, and of course, the things that we want to continue to do because we want to be better partners to a lot of our partners. So, finding number 1, contracts tracking. We agree, that is true. But I do want to add some context because a lot of our contracts tracking is very manual, Excel spreadsheet. Finding number 2, increase in financial and legal risks to the city. There's some context to that, but we'll go into that as well. But quickly, the root causes of this delay, I just want to take everybody back to the period of this audit, 2021 to 2023. We were still very heavily COVID, response for the health department. In addition to that, we had an influx of ARPA funding. That is city ARPA funding. That is the state, and that is the federal government. So for us, we had to prioritize those. So a lot of our routine stuff were essentially neglected. And then to make matters worse for us, we of a team of staff, our 3 most seasoned and experienced staff retired. And then the 2 remaining ones were recent hires. And so, okay. And in addition to that,
I'm going
we-
to just, I apologize. I'm going to stop you there for
Sure.
a quick minute because this has come up pretty frequently in my relatively short time on this board. Just on that issue, could you briefly articulate the transition plan when that happens, when 3 folks retire, when someone who is a keeper of knowledge leaves the agency or leaves the city? How does the health department make sure that the information, the systems that they've built does not get lost in the ether, but is able to be transferred over so that there's continuity and we don't have issues?
So absolutely. I can't speak on what has happened in the past. I do know that we have SOPs that, again, often are not up to date, but that's not something that we are keeping things up to date now. I can't address a lot of things that happened in the past, but we are getting to a space where we want everything in writing. We want everything noted. That way, things are not living in people's minds. So when they do transition, we have a document that says, here's the process, here's what you can do moving forward. So we're not solely fully reliant on, prior staff. But I will say, at the time, we didn't know the type of staff were retiring, and it was more of a coordinated thing that they just left. They retired and they left. And so we didn't see it coming. And I have to also provide the context that we were still very heavily in COVID. So the time and capacity to just pause and try to look for staff is just something that we could not do at the time. But that's not where we are right now. We do have processes and policies in place to be able to move forward if there is a transition. And we have staff up. So we're in, again, much better space than we were in prior years. Okay, all right. But I will also want to add the most important piece to this cause of delays are a cause that we have very zero control over. As many of you know, we are very heavily grant funded, and until the grantor gives you that notice of award, well, there's not much we can do there. I will say that there are instances where we're able to start the process, and that means negotiating the scope of work with the partners and just gathering the document and starting the BOE approval process while we wait for that notice of award. And there are instances when we cannot proceed at all because we need to know what the dollar value of the award would be. Sometimes we apply, but that doesn't guarantee that you'll receive the dollar value that you asked for. Those instances we cannot start. One thing the grantors always do, they fund us based on period of performance, not the time that they send us a notice of award. So a grant may start July 1, but the grantor will send us a notice of award in August. And so now we have to work and negotiate a contract with a partner. So by the time we get that through the board, we are months into the process. However, if the work has already continued, everybody know with the health department, we can't really stop work. A lot of our grants are reoccurring. So we work with our partners in good faith that we will reimburse them at some point in time. What we're looking to do is shorten that some point in time by improving our processes. So again, those instances, we really have very little control over what happens after that.
A quick,
Sure.
Madam City Administrator.
Yep. A quick question about the period of performance. So when we get the grant award, it is dated based off of the period of performance, not the date that we receive the award.
That is correct.
When we negotiate the contracts and agreements with our sub-grantees, is that time also based off of the period of performance, or when we issue the contract?
It's on two parts. So if it's a renewal, reoccurring, a lot of our grants are renewal. So if it's a renewal continuous grant, it is at the time of performance. If it's a brand new grant that we just applied, it's at the time that we are negotiating. It's not time of performance because they haven't started work.
Got it. Thank you.
So it depends, yeah. Next slide, please. This is the most exciting part about this presentation, some of the improvements we've made. Because we asked for this audit, we already started making some improvements. And I would like to note that some of these things may look a little bit not a big deal, but it did save us a lot of times in terms of just getting this contract to the board for approval. One of the first things that we did, we, of course, switched from Excel spreadsheet to Smartsheet. Smartsheet is a lot more It's a lot more efficient than Excel. Excel, we were having issues with multiple people getting into the same data and updating the tracker. And again, it's manual tracking, so every time something moves a step, you have to go back and log it. So that's that human error piece where people were not consistent, and we didn't have capacity to just make sure people are consistently going back to the document and updating it. Because we knew this was an issue prior to even asking the auditors to come, we had reached out to Civic Innovator, and they brought in people from like T. Rowe Price and Under Armour to look at our process. And they also said, you don't have enough data for us to be able to help you in it. But so one of the key things they recommended was you need a contracts lifecycle management system. That's that. So we noted that.
Real quick.
Sure.
When you say you don't have enough data,
So we weren't tracking efficiently. Again, we would need to, every time you receive information, you will have to go into a spreadsheet and log in a date. So every time you communicate with people, you need to, because we needed to
so we
track
were
this
literally
date.
using an Excel spreadsheet to track millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars of grants.
Yes, and
Okay.
we're using Smartsheet now. It's a glorified Excel sheet. So it has a little bit more bells and whistles to allow us to track a little bit better. But it's still.
Madam City Administrator.
Yeah, I will also note the timing of Workday and the implementation of Workday. So prior to Workday, many of our agencies were doing things manually by hand and with Excel spreadsheets. And so I think what we'll hear from the health department is some of the transition that has been made. But unfortunately, during this time, a lot of work was done by spreadsheets.
That is correct. All right, and so another thing we've done was we modified our budget template. We had an outdated 10-page long budget template that sometimes took a very long time for a lot of our partners to grasp, and even our staff internally. So when we would receive our budget information from our partners, it took us a little bit more time to review, and sometimes when we miss something, the audit department will catch it and they'll send it back. We can't touch our partner's budget, so we have to send it back to them to make any changes that we've seen. And what would happen, they have their own internal approval process. So until they get it back to us, we can't move forward. So that is also adding to time. So we took a 10-page document and made it into one. And one of the things that we looked at was what exactly are our grantors looking for? What exactly do we need in that budget to stay compliant? And that's what we ended up modifying it to be able to capture those needs. I would like to pause here and just quickly thank Celeste. I'll probably thank you multiple times during this process because
And I will
I've
thank
annoyed
you.
you more than enough time, but I probably won't stop just yet. But thank you she pointed us in the right direction and say, hey, such and such is doing this. Maybe you can look into what their budget template looks like. And we did that, and we modified again based on what we know we get through audits as well. Another thing that we did that may, again, seems insignificant is Director Lundy. We bothered you as well, reached out to them. So the SMB process is another process that add time. And because we are very heavily federal and state funded, this is a process where we often receive a waiver. I'd like to add that even though we do ask for a waiver, we still are looking to work with a small minority business. So it's not something we're just blanketly looking for a waiver and not look to work with smaller businesses.
Real quick, could you
Sure.
pause there, just so I can get my head clear?
Yes.
Previous question I asked of the auditor, how much in grants coming in, how much in grants, sub-grants going out? Could you give me a
Dollar
articulation?
value, but
Yeah.
I will say we're somewhere about 60%. Most of our money goes back out because we can't do all the work by ourselves, so we have to sub it out to our partners to be able to, do those works with us. But I can get you the exact amount if that's what's needed.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. So 60% of the agency's total budget is then subgranted out to partners, contractors, vendors, whomever.
Yeah.
That's okay. And that was the 60% at the time of this audit represented the 23 or 24 million that the auditor.
So the
about.
auditor's number were based on data that they could track. So that number is a lot higher than what's in there.
25, 26, that's the total.
Okay. All right. Appreciate it.
Okay, so the SMB process was essentially getting a blanket waiver at the grant level. So that means, for instance, our Ryan White grant, we get about, at that time, with $20-something million, and we would probably have about 100 different subrecipients. So instead of going back to SMBD every time and asking for a waiver for each of those, which would add a time, we work with them to get a blanket waiver. So when we receive a grant from the federal state, we reach out to them and we get a blanket waiver, and which we're able to attach to subsequent contracts under that grant. So that saved us about a month in our time. So big improvement. Another thing we did was modified our contracts request memo. Our contracts request memo essentially the intake form that comes in from our program team members that are the ones that's submitting these agreements to us, and that was to essentially. A little bit backstep, we started this process in a work group setting. You know, what are some of those recurring issues that we're seeing? And so that's what informed the changes we made within our contracts memo. We would routinely be asked the same information over and over that we could have collected from the front end, and we weren't. So when those requests are made either by the law department, audits, anyone, we'll go back, ask for it, wait till we receive it, and then we send it back. So by modifying our intake form to include a lot of those requests, we were able to, save time that way. Additionally, we have transitioned to, again, thank you for the law department and a lot of the partners we reach out to get a multi-year agreement. I'd like to note that the multi-year agreement is contingent on funding, and it's also treated as a project year. So we would also receive multi-year funding from our grantor, but they're project year. So you get a project year for like 3, 4, 5 years. However, your budget is a year to year. So you're essentially still treating it as a year to year. And that's so we follow a similar method with our partners so that we can have this agreement in place in time for them to continue work so we can pay them on time. I want to point out the most important piece about getting the contracts through before the grant end or close to grant end. You cannot monitor a partner you don't have an agreement with, because there haven't been no payments made. So you can't go in and audit a finance, like you haven't paid them. There's nothing to audit. So fixing the issue on the front end would help us, and we knew was going to help us on the back end in terms of audit and compliance. So I just wanted to point that out. Another thing we did too, we restructured. We had a team of, we had a contracts unit and we had a compliance unit. So we merged those two units together in order to, just look through the grants life cycle compliance at a more of the entire ecosystem. What can we do on the front end to, again, mitigate the issues on the back end? So merging those two entities together, we were able to start off, the contracts come in. We know that we have to set a schedule for risk assessment and monitoring. So doing that allowed us to do that. In addition to that, we finally have a very detailed SOP. And this is, if you're walking to the door and we give you our SOP and instructions and policies, you will almost not need any training because it details out what you need to do, who you need to talk to, the kinds of questions you need to ask those people to get the information that you need. So that is in place. And also would like to thank a lot of our team members that I have, again, harassed and bothered and said we have to get this done in a group setting. And so we meet every Wednesday. We've met every Wednesday for the last 2 years since I've been back with the health department. And we will continue to make those improvements as we identify those bottlenecks. Almost last but not least, our contracts lifecycle management system. I would like to also thank CA because I think we bothered her as well. And now there's going to be a citywide contracts lifecycle management system that's not only going to help the health department, it's going to be a citywide effort to help everyone. And so that's something we're excited about. Because we know this would take time, we're not internally stopping. We're continuing to find ways to automate our process so we can start to track some of the things we're doing in a less manual, reliant on human. So, Victoria, thank you for all of the YouTube videos and the folks on Microsoft that you've bothered to get to figure out how to automate this process. So July 1, we'll be going live with an internal automation that we've, been working on, so that we can minimize the manual tracking for when you receive something from audits, you have to go back and do it manually. It's gonna be less manual. You'll be able to drag something from one place to another. It still has to be done by a person, but at least you're not manually typing in dates, which sometimes could be typed backwards or just not incorrect. So we are going to continue to make improvements, because one of the things that I realized, fixing the process helps when we when we do get this contract lifecycle management system. We're going to have a more efficient process to bring those new processes into the system versus waiting to create one at the time and then trying to figure it out. And right now we know what the bottlenecks are. We are doing everything we can. We are now transitioned to a period of a space where it's now a more citywide effort, because we work with the law department, we work with the controller's office, we work so many different partners. So that's where we are right now in terms of improvements.
I'm just going to ask a question about that. Very glad to hear we are changing systems. Appreciate the CA and you all for that. That we were using Excel a couple of years ago is concerning, but happy that we're making the transition. One of the things that I've seen as it relates to our permitting system is that we have had a profoundly challenging time migrating data from one system to another. And so I would both plant a very, very significant flag on this issue and also ask, I heard you say you are both continuing along because you don't want to stop, we can't stop granting, we can't stop doing anything that we're doing. I also heard you say we're simultaneously standing up this new system. Could you take a minute or less to explain how those two systems, how the two are existing on parallel tracks, and how we are going to make sure there is a proper way to migrate data from one to the other, make sure all staff that interacts with grants are on board, and just make sure that we don't see what we've seen in a different agency where there was sort of this belief that a new tech would solve a bunch of problems and has actually made those problems significantly worse from the end user perspective. I am sincerely hopeful that we are working through those issues in that department as well. But hearing this, I just have a similar kind of vibe on this, and so would love to hear how we're thinking about what sounds like full speed ahead with one system, but also starting up a new system and just making sure there is a real clear, the train's got to migrate to the next track without it blowing up.
So I want to just quickly add that the new system that we're working on, is still Microsoft. We're, of course, leveraging the resources that the city has to create something. So, and this is something we can stop using as soon as we have a new system. But we needed something still better than Excel or Smartsheet. So this is something we're creating internally, and it's not necessarily a real software or contracts lifecycle management system. It's Power Automate. So instead, it's a Microsoft software. I'm sorry, I'm not an IT technical software person by all means.
Madam City Administrator?
No worries. Thank you so much for that. I think, I'll talk a little bit about the enterprise citywide contract lifecycle management system. So I think about, this was in my first year as city administrator, following some challenges we actually had with MOHS. we convened a grants management coordinating committee. And a part of that grants management coordinating committee, we uncovered challenges with work tags and some of the technical challenges with work days that were causing, that was causing delays. And this idea that everybody was tracking their grants and their contracts manually.
Right.
And so there's an opportunity to leverage Workday. And so what we're looking at is this contract life cycle management system that will integrate with Workday. And so the data from Workday will be feeding, because Workday is our system of record, and we have to continue to, use it as such. And so the data from Workday will power kind of the contract lifecycle management system, which will let us know when contracts are about to expire, a year, 6 months, 3 months before they expire. It'll help us better track our grants. But there are more capabilities within Workday that we have not leveraged or fully accessed, that now that the system is stable, I would say, there's an opportunity for us to better leverage the Workday system to support departments like the health department. I received the feedback about the challenges with the data migration and data integration within new systems. And we actually have a team of people, the ones that are actually working on some of the permit challenges. We have our chief data officer and our data teams are playing a larger role in that data migration and data integration. My hope, though, is that because we already have the data within Workday, that we will have less of a challenge there. But I definitely hear you about the request to ensure that this new system doesn't cause further delays.
I'd like to add that with the contracts lifecycle management system, data migration is, I feel like it plays a very minimal part, because we'll be starting the data part in the system. So we're starting the front end of the contracts in that system. So everything we start there will be captured there. There's no need to migrate a lot of the already approved contracts unless they're active. So we would just be migrating active agreements into this. Actually, we won't need to, because they've been approved by the BOE. It's just to start all the documents that we collect at the front end, because it's starting there, will live there. So I think with other systems of data migration issue, I think for contracts lifecycle management, that would be a minimal concern.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, and to keep our millions of viewers at home,
Absolutely.
So that we're all on the same page here.
Sure.
So we are adopting a new system, the Contracts Lifecycle Management, which is still a Microsoft function. No?
No. We are at the health department are utilizing a Microsoft platform to create something a little bit more automated than Excel.
Okay.
That is what we're working on, just so we can. I'm of the belief when it happens, and I know it's happened, and anything could cause a delay in the contracts lifecycle management system, but we can't afford to wait. So we're looking for anything we can do internally, that doesn't cost us money other than staff time, to create something to help just better the tracking process. It's still more of a tracking. We're still very much manual in the sense that when we send stuff to legal, we're emailing back to the vendor. Those are still very manual, and that's what the contracts lifecycle management system will address. Our automation is just to help better the tracking, for lack of better words. That's helpful.
Okay, so you got the Contracts Lifecycle Management, which is seeking to better automate some of the processes so that we're not, I'm
Just
still.
about all the processes, yeah.
Okay, sure.
Got it. Thank you. So I think what the health department is explaining is that we are about another year or so away from the implementation or the go live of a contracts lifecycle management system. That is going to be citywide. What that will do was it will help every single agency better manage and monitor their contracts. So now we can see when contracts are going to expire, where contracts are in the process. That is going to be connected to Workday. So think about this contract lifecycle management system as being a subsidiary and directly connected to Workday itself. Think about it in that way. What the health department is saying is they can no longer operate off of just spreadsheets and smart sheets. They need something that is a bit more automated. And so they've worked with IT and internal folks to just build a tool. I wouldn't call it a system because it is not an actual system, but a tool that will at least automate some of the process so that everything isn't done by hand. So some dates might pre-populate from Workday, or some of the amounts of a contract might pre-populate so that it's not literally manually being entered by a person, but it is more of a tool rather than a system. Does that make sense?
That does. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I appreciate that. Really appreciate that concise explanation of what's going on. Again, I will sort of return to my previous point, which is I think just anytime we introduce a new tool or system, there's a risk that stuff can get lost in the transition. And it sounds like there are a few things going on simultaneously here in terms of new system and new tool being introduced in parallel. And so I would just, again, caution to please and thank you make sure that nothing gets lost on either side of those transitions. And I heard you on what we're currently doing, in addition to bringing on the contracts lifecycle management in Workday, is we're just trying to more efficiently automate so that we're not having to email the Excel spreadsheet and then email back and so on and so forth.
Okay, I was going to say, think about now adding formulas to an Excel spreadsheet. So instead of manual calculating, you add formulas, so the formulas calculate for you. That's all we're doing right
Okay.
now. That's it.
Got it. Okay. Noted.
And so, I'm sorry, any more questions on this side before we move on to the next slide?
How many more slides are there?
I have like 20 more. Plan to keep you here all day. So we just have two more slides, but I'll be quick. Just go back one more, Kelly, please. Next one. There. Oh, thank you. So I just wanted to sort of share where we are now, where in terms of the time we've been able to reduce based on some of the smaller improvements we've made internally. So as you can see, FY 22 and 23 versus 24, 25, our time and average is going down significantly. You may be wondering why we have FY 26 data, but I wanted to put that there to say for the first time in never, we have FY 26 contracts approved before the start of the fiscal year. That has never happened, so I wanted to highlight that. So we are seeing improvement, and we were getting it done within 90 days. So we are meeting our target. So the goal is to probably set a shorter timeline to see, because again, we want to be able to pay our partners and, retain them. So yeah. Okay, sorry, there was a pause. I thought it was a question. Future improvements, we're working with the law department to standardize the legal template, just to make the subrecipient approval process a little bit easier, because right now we get stuck in negotiation with entities like the Hopkins and a few other ones. So standardizing those templates would help minimize that timeline. So we've been working with the law department on that. We're probably going to continue to restructure internally to get to the most optimum efficiency within our team. And we want to shorten that timeline. Our goal is for FY 26 to reduce our to get to about 65% contracts approved prior to the start date. That's something we believe we can meet based on the improvements we can make. We may not ever get to 100% because there's still that component of the grantor very reliant on when they send us a notice of award. That's something we have zero control over, and that's not, so I can't stand here to say we will ever get to a point where we have 100% of our agreements in place prior to the start of the grant until maybe someone talks to the White House. Sorry. Yeah. All right. And that's it. That's all.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you, Chief Ekpa. I appreciate the detailed presentation. I want to take a just quick moment to thank Mary Beth Haller. Director Haller, or Commissioner Haller, Interim Commissioner Haller has had the unenviable position of not once but twice being, I think twice, right? Being, oh my goodness, 3 times being asked to be interim commissioner in a department that has an incredibly proud history in our city and has had challenges in recent years. And I really want to first just appreciate you stepping in and doing that, because I know it is not something you have relished. You are not someone who seeks spotlight or glorification or any of that. And I just appreciate you being a really good city employee who, in a difficult moment, 3 times has stepped into a role that you didn't ask for. And I've just really, really enjoyed being able to work with you in whatever position you've had. And I want to start there because I think context with these kind of things matters. And you mentioned the context of COVID. You mentioned the context of people shifting jobs. And I know that 3 times during sort of this general period, there's been a commissioner that either stepped down or left for whatever reason, and leadership has shifted. And I think that, frankly, impacts operational capacity within an agency. And so I want to start there. I do want to acknowledge, though, that for an agency that is so heavily grant and sub-grant reliant, it is a really big problem to not have great systems to be able to administer those grants. And I have personally seen, as a partner working very closely with this agency, the damage it can cause, the relational damage, the reputational damage, the damage to the work that it can cause when we don't have great systems in place to get our vendors paid, to make sure they are following all of the correct procedures, and to make sure, as the auditor lifted up, that we're not starting a scope of work before the grant's been signed and before every party is legally liable to said scope of work. And so I am really glad to see the big spreadsheet list of improvements that you all are making in this regard. It is very, very urgent, given the amount of work that this agency does around trauma-informed care, around, you mentioned Ryan White and HIV/AIDS issues, around COVID, and knowing what an enormous lift and what a frankly great job this agency did do. And I thank then Commissioner Gerasa for her work during the pandemic, that Baltimore fared a lot better than a lot of other cities, and that is to everyone here's credit. It is just extremely important that we get this right. And the last thing I want to say, and sorry for being on a soapbox here, but is that, you know, one of the things that I think we as a board, we as a city, we as the council, the administration need to really think about is building capacity within this agency, that sometimes we can become allured to the benefits of granting and sub-granting, and that, you know, we have amazing partners in this space. Baltimore is a health town. We've got some of the best hospitals in the world. We've got incredible public health organizations. There is so much there, but if we do not have the right infrastructure internally to be able to manage the relationships with that entire ecosystem, with those partners, then we will fail the people that we are here to serve. And so I cannot emphasize enough the importance of this body of work for this agency. And City Administrator and I have had a little bit of this conversation, but one of the things that I feel really, really strongly about as we, and again, thank you to our great city solicitor for the extraordinary work to bring on just an absolute windfall of funds related to opioid lawsuits. One of the things that I'm really hoping that we are doing, in addition to the restitution fund, in addition to supporting partners that are doing extraordinary harm reduction, recovery type work, is building our own internal capacity so that we do not stay in a cycle where it feels out of control and nobody wants to work with us because they don't feel like they're going to get paid on time. I will now hop off of my soapbox and entertain any questions from the board. Comptroller Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I will never apologize for being on my soapbox. I've read the charter. My job is like 75% soapbox. I do want to, well, first, actually, I do have a data question. How long have you been with the health department?
How long have I been with the
Yeah.
health department? Since initially 2002, and then I worked at city schools for 6 years, and then I came back in 2012.
Okay, so you're on second tour of duty.
Second tour.
Okay. Yeah, okay. We're going to talk to you later about the merchandising options here. Like, we're considering T-shirt, hat, tote bag, coffee mug. Do you have a preference?
I think the tumbler, the insulated tumbler.
Insulated tumbler. Okay, good, great. Okay. All right.
Make sure it's less than $30, please.
Less than $30.
I don't think that's going to be a problem. I do want to take a minute and do not an unsimilar version of what the council president did. I have a lengthy list of people that my team would like to thank in to acknowledge the effort and collaboration which has been underway for many months now to bring the health department's grant transactions current. And this progress is owed to the direct executive engagement led by Mary Beth, Acting Commissioner, Kelly Eastman, Chief of Staff back there, Uname Ekpa, Chief Fiscal Officer, also Nalisa Inyang. Is she? There we go. I got you. Grants Services Specialist, and Kathy Smith, in-house counsel. She's not here. Okay, it's good to keep the lawyers busy somewhere else. Okay, and their teams who have dedicated themselves to letting go of, and this is a real big thing for me, the way we've always done it, which has been important in moving the backlog of transactions forward. I appreciate the fact that they have laid out a lot of the details of this, and I encourage them to continue to brag about the progress that you've made to date. I also want to shout out the always collaborative and supportive partners we have in our law department, especially Michael Schrock and Rob Nanofsky and the whole contracts group. And last but never ever least, for their diligence, patience, and tireless efforts, our own Carla Winchester and the Contracts Compliance Review Team. In full disclosure, I am moved to make these remarks by our very own clerk to the board, Celeste D'Amato, who is rarely effusive in the face of messy processes and systems, but has nothing but praise for the essential ingredient to this turnaround, which is these dedicated people and their leadership. With that, I will turn it back over to the president.
Madam City Administrator.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Comptroller. I wanted to actually take a moment to thank Celeste for her partnership and to acknowledge all of the great work that she has done with the Health Department. In addition, they are not here, but over a year ago, the mayor announced that he was bringing on Josh Sharfstein as well as Michelle Spencer as special advisors to the mayor on health. And we brought back Michelle Spencer specifically to help out with operations and contracts. And so Michelle has been supporting Uname as well as Mary Beth, Commissioner Howler, on some of the reform efforts. So I just, too, like the comptroller, want to take a moment to acknowledge the progress that's been made and the work that still needs to be done. We are still very far from where we need to be, given the amount of grants that come into the health department, and quite frankly, given the unknown that will likely impact agencies like the health department, which is even another reason why it is even more critical that, as you said, Mr. Council President, we get this right and we put the structures and policies and procedures in place to be able to better track and maintain our grants. I do think that we are going in the right direction and we just don't need to take our foot off the gas, but wanted to take a moment to just acknowledge some of the additional partners that have been supportive in this space.
I guess since we're doing thank yous, also acknowledge our health chair on the city council, Felicia Porter, who's doing a really good job in collaborating and working with the agency and addressing some of the behavioral health, as well as now that our lawsuits are done, looking forward to engaging around opioid issues that we've had. All right, other questions? Good? Okay. Again, appreciate the progress. Extremely important body of work. Look forward to seeing how these new systems interact, make sure the data is migrating, make sure everybody's trained up, make sure when folks leave, they don't bring all the knowledge they've accumulated with them, and just make sure we are building internal human capacity to manage systems and processes, because a new system is only as good as the people that work in it. So again, thank you all. This audit is noted.
Thank you.
Item 2.
The next item on the non-routine agenda is SB 2512013. This is a request from the Department of Law to approve an agreement with the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners. This agreement covers payment for school-based health care workers covering July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2030. On behalf of the Law Department, we have Deputy Solicitor Stephen Salisbury. Deputy Solicitor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Council President, Madam City Administrator, Mr. Comptroller, and members of the board. This agreement, going back several decades now, the city and the school system are responsible for collaborating to provide health services in Baltimore City Public Schools. The city and the city schools have managed this responsibility through a series of MOUs between the city, specifically through the health department, and the Baltimore City Board of Schools Commissioners. Historically, the city has staffed the 149 Baltimore City public schools with school health suites. Over the last few years, in connection with changes under the Kerwin legislation, schools has begun staffing a number of the health suites. So this agreement really has three components you can think of. First is a one-time upfront payment to cover the cost that the school system had incurred over fiscal years 22, 23, 24, and then this year, fiscal 25, for their basically out-of-pocket expenses for staffing the health suites that they were staffing. So there's 149 schools. At this point in time, schools is now staffing 36 of the health suites, and the health department is staffing 113. So there is a one-time upfront payment to cover those, sort of a true-up, if you will, of those last few years, and that's the $9.1 million that's referenced in the agreement. Second, there is basically a predetermined rate at which the city is going to, moving forward, reimburse the schools on a per-school basis going forward through the duration of the agreement. It'll be adjusted for inflation each year. And again, to date, there are 113 schools that the health department is staffing, but each year there's an agreement to negotiate if that number is going to go up or down at all. But at least we now have a locked-in rate that we can that we'll be using to reimburse for each school. And then third, the agreement really covers just all the other non-financial issues, basically the scope of services around what services the health suites will provide, other issues about covering things like supplies, and basically everything else that goes into the agreement. Ultimately, I think this is a really positive thing. This is something that the city, the health department, and the school system has been negotiating for a very long time. This agreement will provide clarity and certainty, both from a staffing perspective and from a budgetary standpoint for the life of the contract. It goes through fiscal year 30. I want to thank, we had several parties that really worked closely with us on this. First of all, the health department is all still here, specifically the interim commissioner, also Kathy Smith and Francine Childs, who were really instrumental in helping us work on this. Also, Deputy Director of Finance, Bob Senemy, who's here. And then finally, our counterparts over at City Schools. We've been negotiating this for quite some time. It's a complicated agreement, but we feel like this has really brought resolution to a long-standing issue around the provision of health services and ultimately ensuring that we have health suites for all of our city school students. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I appreciate it. This is a really important issue to this city council, and I'm sure to this entire board as well, particularly given potential challenges we may see in the healthcare space and over the next few years. I'll just observe as a former teacher and as a city schools dad that where we have effective school-based health suites, we see the needle move for our kids, particularly kids who, for whatever reason, may lack health insurance, may lack an ability to get proper, ongoing, proactive health care. And so nailing down the financial arrangement, I think, is extremely important, because the sense that I've gotten in the past is that there's been some punting of the ball back and forth in terms of who is responsible, who is financially liable for what services. And again, it's a complicated system. I'll just lift up KIPP School in West Baltimore, where they have a incredible school-based health suite with a doctor who's in there, with a nurse practitioner, with several PAs and nurses. I mean, it is just beautiful to behold, and seeing children in that suite, whether it's physical or mental health, but the connection that they're able to have is just like a beautiful thing. And it's worth acknowledging that I think Baltimore is pretty ahead of the curve on this. And one of those issues where like we don't take a lot of credit publicly or otherwise, but I just think it's a wonderful thing. I used to represent Patterson High School. They've got one, again, complex set of health needs for the children in that school, and a lot of kids who otherwise parents would have a challenging time getting them to the doctor. And so I think this is like a really good thing that the city does. And you might not be the right person to ask this, but I'm going to ask, since you're in front of me. It sounds like we have figured out the financials to better operationalize this system. Do you feel like, having spent time interacting with the various parties that are involved, that the systems are on the same page now, not just in terms of like who pays for it, but in terms of like moving these moving community health suites or health-based centers forward. Because again, I felt historically there's been a lot of friction and unclear. Is it the health department? Is it city schools? Is it whatever the provider is? And like not a great amalgamation of the different parties. Do you feel like we are now in a better place, not just financially, but to be able to operationalize all of this work?
Yes, I absolutely do. And it has been, I mean, I'll be very candid. We've been working on this agreement for like close to 2 years. And part of the reason it took so long is first there was this financial component, and you had these changes in the law that, you know, for good reason were, I think, speaking to the points that you were talking about, really ensuring, setting a higher floor in terms of what we're going to be providing in our schools. That happened to coincide with COVID and a major increase in the cost of nursing. And so the financial aspects of it were hard. And I think that the finance department in particular, for being able to, you know, manage that and get us to a point where we are meeting our obligations, and obviously balancing that with the many other issues that we have, you know, was really an undertaking and an endeavor. But to the other points you're making in terms of getting the parties on the same page, that was a whole, you know, we sort of got through the financial component of it and you think, okay, great, we're done. And it's really complicated to understand exactly what everybody's responsibilities are, where the one ends and the other begins, who's providing the supplies, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think that, yes, we have, at the end of this process, part of the reason it has taken as long as it had as it has taken up to now, is to get the parties on the same page with all these agreements. Now, with every agreement, you know, you're never going to think of every conceivable contingency under the sun, but I really think that we had a good working relationship. We got the parties together, and I think that we are as on the same page. I think that the interim commissioner would say the same thing. We are on the same page as we've been in a long time on this, and I think that is a really good thing for the health suites in the schools.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. You know, want to again appreciate our Health Committee Chair, Felicia Porter, who's extremely passionate about this issue, James Torrance as well, who's our Housing Chair, also has done work in this space, and then John Bullock, who is our Education Committee Chair, as well as the school board commissioners, as you mentioned, Chair Sally and the team over there. I know there have been good conversations, and so it is very heartening and encouraging to hear that assessment. Again, I think given what we are likely to see over the next few years in terms of challenges to our healthcare system, having these types of school-based programs for our kids and for their families is extremely important. So very glad to hear there's just more of a collaborative energy around this. It has felt challenging these last couple of years.
Yeah. No, I again totally agree, and I think we feel really positive about where we've gotten to today. So
appreciate that. Questions from the board, Madam Solicitor?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to really just acknowledge, because my deputy will never do it, the many hours that he put in to make this happen. It absolutely was years-long process. And I also want to really thank Bob Sinema, Deputy Director over in finance, for helping us understand it. It took a while for me to understand it, so the combination of Stephen and Bob, and then of course Kathy Smith and the commissioner at the time, and then the interim commissioner, it was just really a difficult situation, but we all knew that it was important. And then having the flexibility of schools, we just appreciate their partnership for something that is very critical to our students. So just wanted to thank everybody.
thank you, boss.
Madam CA?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that we also thank Bob Sinema, who has been at the forefront of this for years. And I actually recall very early on when I started as the Deputy Mayor for Equity, Health, and Human Services, this was one of the first issues that we took on, and here we are now finally with a negotiated agreement. So big shout out to Bob for all of his work on this.
Love all the gratitude in this meeting. It's nice. It's good vibes right now. We just finished our budget. It was intense, so everyone's feeling appreciative.
You may just be thankful that the fiscal year is over.
That too. And we'll also just lift up the really good partners in this space, like BHB, like Hopkins. The many, many hands that are working together for our kids. Anybody else? All right.
I could thank Bob Senemy. Thanks, Bob.
Never a bad idea.
Bob has been properly thanked.
I'm going to come see you about something else later. Okay.
All right. Seeing no further questions or thank yous, I would entertain a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving this item say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The item is approved. The next item on the non-routine agenda is SB 2511923 from the Law Department. This request is to approve a settlement agreement and release with David Morris. Period of agreement is based on board approval. On behalf of law, Deputy City Solicitor Stephen Salisbury, the floor remains yours.
Thank you, Mr. Council President, members of the board. The Law Department is recommending a settlement. This is in connection with a civil lawsuit arising from Mr. Morris's 2004 arrest and conviction for murder. Just a little bit of background on this case. Mr. Morris was arrested on December 10th, 2004 in connection with the murder of Mustafa Carter. He was convicted by a jury in August 2005 and sentenced to 50 years in prison. In 2019, the state's attorney's office reinvestigated the case and submitted DNA testing, submitted DNA for additional testing. Based on that DNA testing, Mr. Morris was ruled out as a suspect for the murder. The state's attorney's office then joined a petition for a writ of actual innocence and conceded in the process that the state's attorney's office had failed to disclose exculpatory evidence about an alternative suspect prior to the trial. The court at the time, in 2021, granted the writ of actual innocence, and Mr. Morris was released from incarceration after serving approximately 17 years in prison. Mr. Morris then brought an action under what's known as the Lomax Act against the state of Maryland for his wrongful incarceration. In that process, he was awarded $1.46 million, as well as some attorney's fees. And it was for the time, basically, that he had served after his conviction. Once that case was resolved, Mr. Morris brought this lawsuit against the city and the BPD defendants, seeking additional compensation for basically the time that was served pre-trial. To resolve this case and to avoid the expense and further exposure at trial, the police department and the city have agreed to the amount, to a settlement in the amount of $375,000. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about this case.
Thank you. I was not here at the time, but I know this board spent a lot of time dealing with settlements related to the Gun Trace Task Force, the previous board. Is there any indication that this case was linked to that set of scandals?
Not that I'm aware of. I can definitely double check on that. This arrest and conviction happened many years before the Gun Trace Task Force had been formed. So I'm not sure if there's any officers who would have been connected in that. I also want to reiterate that the key issues here really had more to do with what the prosecution failed to turn over to the defense.
Understood.
All of this exculpatory evidence had been turned over from the police department to the state's attorney's office.
Understood.
So I can't say for, I can double check and make sure that there were no officers who were in any way involved with both, but not that I'm aware of.
Got it. So really more on the state's attorney at the time than the police department.
Correct.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Seeing and hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving this item, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The item is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. The next item on the non-routine agenda is SB 11555. This is a request to note the annual report for project fund submissions from the Baltimore Civic Fund covering the period of April 1, 2024 to March 31, 2025. On behalf of the Baltimore Civic Fund, we have President Hai-Sook Chung. President Chung, the floor is yours.
Good morning.
Morning.
Madam City Solicitor, City Administrator, Council President, and Mr. Comptroller, thank you so much for allowing us to submit this proposal. This is my first time at the BOE, so please be gracious. I'll try my best to represent this report and our staff who've worked very hard to get us here. First, I wanted to provide some context. Are we on our first slide, please? Around the partnership we have with the city, which is quite unique for a city to have a mayoral fund of this kind. We are a 501c3, and we've been in existence since 1981 and served as a fiscal sponsor for the city, advancing both the mayoral priorities as well as the council's, managing over $20 million annually for over 100 programs. We do this in 3 different ways. First, a fiscal sponsorship agreement in which charitable contributions are passed through to us as the primary funding source and work with the BOE. And this is through a fiscal sponsorship agreement that we passed last spring in partnership with the law office as well as the comptroller's office. And this was approved by the BOE in April 17th of 2024. And this is the primary, I would say about 70% of the work we do through our fiscal sponsorship agreement. Then we manage federal, state, and philanthropic grants, and that come directly to the city, and we serve as a sub-recipient or a service provider for grant making or general fiscal administration. And this is a separate type of agreement which is reviewed by the city law and approved by the BOE. And lastly, the third type is where we provide the fiscal administration services for cities' general funds. These services are governed by a master funding agreement, again approved and amended on April 17, 2024, and the BOE resolution relating to guidelines for project fund submission. And this is the annual report, which reflects from starting April 1st, 2024 to March 31st, 2025, the categories under which the project fund submissions will reflect. Second, next slide, please. We just wanted to echo and just reiterate that as a fiscal sponsor, we do not get any funding from the city line item in their budget. We operate as an independent nonprofit, which means we have dedicated funding sources through the administrative fee structure, which provides us the operating budget. We are a staff of 9. We have accounting and grant-making software. We allow the city agencies and any of our partners to use our 501c3 status to independently fundraise. And we have additional services and tools that we provide as a fiscal sponsor. We just want to point out that during this, our general rate that we started last fall is at 8%, which is much lower than the federal and state de minimis rate at 15%. Are you okay? Okay. Sorry. So now here we are. I wanted to highlight real quick our next slide, please. The master funding agreement. So the city had requested for us to better track the designated city general funds that we manage with the project fund submission form that the BOE reviews. Now, this submission allows at least city agencies to identify in 3 different categories for their rationale and reason for why they would transfer city funds to the Civic Fund. First, a city project requires a competitive grant-making process. And so again, we provide that capacity and a grant-making structure, and we also can make payments that often is asked to be expedited. Second rationale is that it combines multiple funding streams, meaning that it's braided or have a complicated funding mechanism, which often includes philanthropic, charitable, and other corporate donations. And this is excluding federal and state dollars. And then lastly, the city project requires a payment to individuals. Oftentimes, we are asked to make payments to individuals who might not have documentation or do not have stability in housing, and so we often have to use our mechanism to make payments to individuals without the proper tax documentations. So this is really a quick overview about the ways in which city funds can be transferred to us. And if we're outside of these three requests, it requires a prior approval from the COA and the BOE clerk. Next. So here are the numbers for this period. We had a total of 14 city transfers with city general funds from 8 different accounts, totaling $5,693,913. The Civic Fund received $423,613 from admin fees, which totals about 7.4%. And then below that, the table outlines in which categories the forum reflected or the project reflected in terms of their rationale to moving these city funds to us. First, there were 3 transfers for specifically grant making, which totaled $605,000. The second was payment processes, either challenges in the city's process or delays that might be occurring, and there was only 1 transfer of that for $63,913. The next category was for multiple funding streams, which was a braided of multiple types of funds, and that was 8 different transfers at $4,475,000. And then there was 2 transfers that had a combination of more than one rationale or reason. Both, they checked the funding, multiple funding sources and non-traditional payment requests, and that was at $550,000, a total of $5,693,000. So that was it for this report period, and I want to just point out one thing, which is it's outside of a traditional fiscal year or a calendar year, but it starts from April 1st at the sign of the or approval of the master agreement and the process that we instituted last spring. So I just wanted to catch that because it does provide a little different context and a full capture. It moves from one fiscal year to the next fiscal year. With that, I would be happy to entertain any questions.
First off, want to just thank you for your diligent work. Appreciate what you've been able to bring to the Civic Fund. Appreciate the partnership you've had with our office, with city council offices, with the board. Just grateful for the body of work. To your point, it is like a not traditional arrangement, but I am grateful for it. One of the concerns that I've had is, and I don't know that this is unique to Baltimore. I assume there's other cities that have a similar arrangement, but we tend to have a lot of funds in this city. There's a civic fund, there's the Family League, there's the youth fund, there's an affordable housing trust fund. There are all these funds that are either quasi-governmental, nonprofit, are administered within government, and sometimes I worry that there is not a clear administrative process by which they all interact with each other. That I wonder sometimes if the left hand is talking to the right hand. If, for example, you give out or subgrant a grant that's related to kids, whether the Family League or the Youth Fund knows about it. We are blessed in Baltimore to have a lot of nonprofits and a lot of groups and organizations that do extraordinary work. But I think there's at times been confusion about sort of all these different pots, if you will, of money. In addition, we are also blessed in this town to have a robust philanthropic foundation community. We have great partnerships, and I am truly grateful to, I'm not going to name names, but many of the foundations in town, both for the work that they do and also the way in which they show up and partner with the city and operate in thought partnership. But I think that for the end user, for nonprofits, for organizations, for community-based organizations, for sometimes even government, like it is a lot going on, and it has felt, as someone who ran a nonprofit, dealt with grants. I didn't have any like public dollars when I was running my organization, but I think some of the feedback that I receive these days is that like it's a little unclear what the sort of total picture is supposed to look like. And so I'm curious, in your role as director of the Civic Fund, how are we creating an ecosystem that is easily understandable, and who is managing it, and how are you interacting with other funds, other foundations, other groups that people go to get money for their causes?
That's a great question. And I'm not quite sure if I can address all of the different funds, as they all have different oversight and different relationships with the city. What I can speak to is just our role and the importance of collaboration that I think you and Comptroller Henry and the COA has seen from our office. And when I started 6.5 years ago, we didn't have a robust relationship with the city. So again, the question of transparency, systems work integration, but under City Administrator Leach's leadership, many of us sit on the mayor's cabinet. So for the first time over her tenure, we are collaborating more on the very systems level in terms of providing each other some updates at those meetings. But in terms of digging deeper into how we work together on some of the different pools of money, I don't think we've quite addressed that yet. I've spent the last 6 years really trying to get us up to speed on the wishes of the comptroller, the wishes of the mayor and the city administrator, and how we operate with the city. So I think that's the first step. And then moving on, I think there's plenty of opportunities for us to better coordinate with the other funds. I know that under City Administrator Leach's direction, the new grants director has been pulling us together on the city side. That includes us and other funds to start better setting the foundation. I think one of the questions is, what are we managing? How much are we all managing? And I think we're creating, at this time, a baseline of information. And I think that will be the beginning of more coordination on our end. And we're happy to, keep you updated as things progress.
Yeah, it is one of the things that I'm personally very interested in, and I think this board is too, is just this entire ecosystem, knowing that, again, to the federal government of it, we may be heading into a period of austerity and less support from the federal government, knowing that there's going to be hard choices ahead. I think we've always struggled with this as a city, at least since I've been on the scene. There is this like siloization that happens in a lot of these spaces, and it can be really, really hard to get the right set of partners and actors together in the same room and to kind of figure out, how are we coordinating? How are we partnering? How are we supporting each other? How are we not just, fighting for who gets the credit or whatever, but actually like moving the work collectively with collective impact? So, I realize this is like a very big question and not one that your individual agency should solve for us, but I think it's an important one for the city. I know Ali Smith has been doing some really good work in this space of trying to sort of be the connector. I appreciate the city administrator's work here. But, as we're reflecting on the good work, and it sounds like some real process and system improvements that you all have made to address some specific deficiencies within the Civic Fund, I think it's important that we're also thinking globally as well about sort of the Baltimore of it
Yep.
and this at times very messy ecosystem that we're in.
That's absolutely right. And the Chief Philanthropic Officer, who you just mentioned, Allie Smith, has been working with the Grants Office to lay this foundation and identify all the resources and how things are being utilized in the city. So we're starting to think about it in a very macro way, but it will take time. Yeah, it will take time, and we look forward to continuing to update you.
Absolutely. City Administrator?
Sure. Thank you so much, President Chung, for your presentation and for your leadership at the Civic Fund. I just wanted to make sure that we're not conflating topics and issues here. What the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was mentioned, and I just want to be clear that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the Civic Fund are not similar entities. They're different entities for different purposes. So I guess there could be some connectivity to the youth fund, but the civic fund is only a fund whenever a philanthropist or someone from philanthropy makes a donation to the Baltimore Civic Fund and or the city establishes a project. It is not a fund in the same way that the Children and Youth Fund is, where they are just giving out grants based off of the board's wishes. They are only able to give out grants if the city or some outside entity establishes a fund in a grant process and asks them to deliver on that fund. So the civic fund operates, it just operates differently than all the other players, I think, in the ecosystem. And the civic fund, while the structure of the civic fund is slightly different than what exists in other places, it is not unusual for a city of our size to have a philanthropic arm that lives outside of government.
That's,
Yeah, and I hear you. I don't want to conflate different funds. I think the point that I'm making is that it is confusing, and there are a lot of funds in this space, and I am the president of the Baltimore City Council and someone who used to run a nonprofit, and I still experience a fair degree of confusion about the intersecting and at times complex arrangements. And I do know that there of course are organizations that ultimately end up with civic fund funds that may also go to a children and youth fund, may also go to a affordable housing trust fund. And so I want to be clear here. My concern is not that, like, I understand the purpose of the civic fund as something that is indirect partnership with city government in this very direct way. But I think my overall point is there's a lot of funds out there, and I don't expect anyone on this board or anyone in this room to solve it. But I will say it is, I think, at times confusing for our partners in this space. And again, I'll acknowledge for me at times, as someone who pays pretty close attention to how all this moves around. And so the overall point for me is that I think there is work to be done on building an ecosystem, building a process map, and all the rest.
yep.
Can I also just take a point to clarify? So an organization wouldn't receive civic fund funds. They would receive funds that the city set up or an outside entity has donated to the city, and the civic fund has accepted on behalf of the city.
Yep.
So one example is we established an abortion rights fund,
Yes.
for example.
Yep.
But the city established that. The civic fund does not establish funds. They don't have funds. They only have funds if the city provides those funds or if philanthropy provides those
That's right.
funds.
That's
So when they receive, so when that partner receives funds, they're receiving it from the city, or they're receiving it from the donor that donated to the civic fund for said purpose. So that's what I'm trying to clarify is
That's
their
right.
role in the process.
Totally understand.
Yeah.
Got it.
and-
And again, I think if you're that abortion fund, if you are that abortion fund, what I'm saying is that I think it has at times, like some of the feedback that I have received from partners in this space is that it has felt fuzzy about where city government starts, where civic fund starts, where philanthropic. But I receive and I'm clear that essentially, to summarize, it's a pass-through.
Yep.
That it's not, that someone else, i.e. us or philanthropy, is granting these dollars to said organization, to said abortion fund, or whatever the case may be. I think the itch that I am trying to scratch in this conversation is about just the overall ecosystem and how, and again, I don't pretend to know that this is like a uniquely Baltimore thing, but I do know that it has long been a challenge in our city of, even within the sort of like philanthropic and giving space, be it government, foundation, et cetera, that there is confusion for organizations that receive funds.
So, if I may, just to clarify a few things. Unlike the other organizations that are traditional funds, most of their funding, I believe, come from city or state. For us, I would say, and it's increased a little bit, Rachel, but I think about the majority of our work, I would say about 70% of our work is fiscal sponsorship. Fiscal sponsorship means that a project comes to us, usually in that case funded by philanthropists, private philanthropy. And in those cases, oftentimes either the city agency or the philanthropic partner is unable to give to a local jurisdiction like the city. They can't fund the city. And this is why, in this particular case, an agency would come to us and use us as a nonprofit partner to have that. So as a fiscal sponsor, we're only what you call the back-end finance department for a city project. We only work with city agencies, the mayoral office, executive office, and some council projects. So we're not a traditional fiscal sponsor. We're not a traditional fund in that way. Grant making is a relatively new body of work. And we started it because, again, in a situation where we needed to move quick. Mayor, at that time, Young had noticed, and Mayor Scott noticed, that we wanted to utilize additional mechanisms to ensure community-based organizations, often not able to compete for federal dollars, had opportunities. And for the first time, we started doing grant making to ensure that it was accessible and the process was set up in a way that it was going to be successful both for the city as well as the grantees who were applying. And that's why I think we're a little different that way. And then again, this report is, for the first time, again, based on need, we started to take some city dollars for specific projects for particular reasons. And so I'm not quite sure. I think to the point that the city administrator making, we are a very specialized. We're not like the other funds where we're managing a portfolio of funds from the city to do X, Y, and Z. The 110 projects are managing a $10,000 grant from the Cal Ripken Foundation for a baseball camp that Rec and Parks wants to implement. I mean, it's that to big events like the Back to School backpack event. And that is all philanthropic or corporate sponsorship. So in those cases, they're not utilizing city dollars.
Understood.
Yeah. So I hope that clarifies a little our distinction, I guess.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate that. Other questions from the board? Mr. Comptroller?
I'm only going to ask one because
Yes,
I'm
yes.
seeing that we're still on item number 4 of 10, and we're opening bids at noon. So
Okay.
I just, like, you noted in the report
Yes.
that you're getting about $5.7 million of transfers from city funds, and the 7.4% administrative fee gives you a little over 400. How much other money is coming in such that where does the rest of your funding come from?
Funding for operating?
For operations,
Oh,
yeah.
for operations, We have had a kind of a long process working with the city to implement a more consistent admin fee. 100% of our operating costs come from either administrative fees or individual or corporate donations. We don't fundraise for our general operating budget. So essentially, I would say until this last winter, the fall of 2024, we were free of service for the city until we started getting a stable amount of administrative percentage to cover our operating costs.
I'm sorry, let me ask it a different way.
Okay.
What's your total operating budget?
What's our total operating? Thank you. I think just after this fiscal year, we're just at 1.1 million. And
Okay, so you're getting about 600,000 to 700,000 in funding from somewhere other than Baltimore City.
well, no,
Okay.
come on over. I just want to specify again what I said, which was this report is only
For this 1 year.
not 1 year.
Oh.
1 quarter of last fiscal year, and then April 1st, 2024 to March 31st. So it's not a calendar year or it's not a fiscal year. So it's a very unique, this is what we were asked to report on.
This is also a mechanistic report. So this is only city funds transferred via the project form submission form.
Okay.
So we get other transfers from the city. For example, when we get ARPA funds, they are not done via this form. They are done via standalone subrecipient agreements.
Okay.
So that none of that money is in this report. This report, as detailed in the master funding agreement, only asked us to report on the money that came via that specific transfer
Gotcha.
process.
Okay.
So all of our money that we get is from the city.
Okay.
Yep.
Or from philanthropic
Philanthropic partners, yep.
On behalf of the city.
Yep.
But they come through different mechanisms.
Different channels.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was the part that I was
Yeah.
curious, because I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I cannot believe, like,
No,
from
no,
the
no,
salaries I've
yeah.
seen,
No.
that
No,
you're doing 9
No.
FTEs on $423,000
No,
a year.
that's just
Yeah, okay.
just very finite information
Gotcha.
based on what was required of this report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Okay, this item is noted.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The next item on, wait, did I do that right? Yeah. Okay. Yep. All right. The next item on the non-routine agenda is SB 2512066. This is a request for the board to note a side letter agreement with Pratt Workers United, AFSCME Maryland Council 3. That agreement will allow for proper identification of the workers in Workday. On behalf of the Labor Commissioner, we have Commissioner Deborah Moore-Carter. Commissioner Moore-Carter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, honorable members of the board. I'm Deborah Moore-Carter, Labor Commissioner for the City of Baltimore, and I'm here as a volunteer. And I'll tell you why, because the Office of the Labor Commissioner volunteered to help Pratt get everything through. So what I'm doing now is creating a union code so that the next step in the process can happen. So let me give you a little background. So AFSCME Council 3 won the right to organize and negotiate for the Pratt Library employees who were previously considered unrepresented but received the benefits of other bargaining units. So negotiations are still continuing. It's been a couple of years, and they're building the MOU from scratch. So how I was here in December because they were represented by other bargaining units to give them the wage increases of those other bargaining units retroactively. So now what we're doing is creating a union code so that they can actually be represented by AFSCME Council 3 called Pratt Library Employees United. And the other thing that is happening is that we're meeting on a weekly basis so that once the MOU, I'll be back to the Board of Estimates, hopefully, to get the MOU noted once it's completed. And then we're working on a weekly basis with DHR, Finance, and other partners so that when the MOU is in place, that we'll have new grades and new classifications for those workers. Any questions?
Mr. Comptroller.
Not a question, but again, just I want to take this opportunity to thank the Labor Commissioner for being willing to step in and volunteer. This was an issue that Pratt and AFSCME and the workers had all been struggling with for a long time, and I was very happy to hear that the Office of the Labor Commissioner had volunteered to step in and take care of this issue. Again, on this day of gratitude at the Board of Estimates, I do want to thank the Labor Commissioner for the office's work on this.
Thank you.
Also, gratitude for stepping in. I do have a question, though.
Yes, sir.
So one of the units of employees that is very personally important to me is the peer navigators in the library. This is a program that was started a few years ago as an extension of the city's trauma-informed care law. The then head librarian, Heidi Daniel, had this insight where she said, look, we're continuing to do this really anachronistic zero-tolerance practice where anyone who appears to be struggling with any kind of substance use disorder or addiction issue, the protocol is just write them up, kick them out. And that's not trauma-informed, that's not humane, and that doesn't actually help anyone get better. And so she, along with a number of partners, health department and others, decided instead of just doing away with that policy to actually bring a whole new set of employees into the library, and those were the peers. Peers are folks who have lived experience dealing with addiction and who have been in recovery, who actually get certified by the state to support and address other folks who are struggling with addiction. It has been a really, really, really successful program. I was able to bring the city solicitor to come check it out. It's been a great partnership with Enoch Pratt. But one of my concerns about the peers is that at the time when we started it, there was only one of them, and then we grew the program, and we got a grant from Care First, and then we've started to bring it more in-house. But it's a very vulnerable workforce. It's folks who've had experience with addiction. It's people who are leading with their heart, but often at times have challenges. And so making sure they are supported, well paid, have health insurance, are treated as real city employees is really important to me, and that they become unionized. So my question is, are the peer navigators part of this bargaining agreement?
That I'm not really sure of, but I'll find out and get back to you.
I would deeply appreciate that.
I will.
Again, vulnerable part of the workforce, and it's important to me. I'm really glad that we're getting there in terms of AFSCME and the city and the library all coming to terms, but I don't want to leave any of our most vulnerable workers behind.
Yes, sir. Understood.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Mr. Comptroller?
I mean, I can always ask the Labor Commissioner questions, but the fact of the matter is, I see that we've been rejoined by the city administrator, and we now have quorum again. So I think I will forego my questions in the opportunity and allow the council president to ask for a motion.
No motion needed, sir. This item is noted
Oh,
by
it's
the
just
board.
Thank
it's
you.
just okay.
Yep.
Even better.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. The next item is on the non-routine agenda is SB 2511946. This is a request for the board to approve a pre-qualification of contractors on behalf of DPW. We have Deputy Director Garbark. Deputy Director Garbark, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Comptroller, Madam Administrator, honorable members of the Board of Estimates. I'm Matt Garbark, Deputy Director for the Department of Public Works. This is an item that we submit Every meeting in Baltimore City, as with most jurisdictions, you have to be pre-qualified in order to bid on contracts, construction contracts or consulting contracts for engineering and architecture. This is an item that just pre-qualifies a list of firms, and it provides an amount of funding up to which they are capable of bidding on. My understanding is that a protest was received about one particular firm, and the concerns with them having been pre-qualified. This information was brought to our attention, and as Madam Clerk mentioned at the beginning, that firm was removed from the pre-qualification so that we can investigate that issue in more detail and come back to the board at that point. So happy to answer any questions.
Great. The board received a statement of opposition on this matter from John C. Murphy on behalf of the Economic International Construction Company. At this time, I invite Mr. Murphy to present his opposition to the board in person, which I do not see. Mr. Murphy, is he online?
Mr. President.
No. Mr. Comptroller?
It's possible that Mr. Murphy's opposition may have been to Metra's inclusion on the list. And so with the DPW's withdrawal of Metra, his protest may be rendered effectively mute.
Duly
I'm sorry,
noted.
his statement of opposition may be no longer in existence.
Got it. Okay. Questions, Madam City Administrator?
Just a very quick note. I want to thank Mr. Murphy for the protest and the flag. And Mr. Comptroller will recall that this board did take action against Metra Inc. And so we just need to ensure that we're working together internally to ensure that we're not including them in future bids.
Exactly.
Got it. All right. Sounds like a happy resolution for all. Are there any additional questions? All right. Seeing and hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving this item say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. The item is approved. The next item on the non-routine agenda is a walk-on item on behalf of the Bureau of Procurement. Item SB 2512133 is a sole source contract with Municipal Emergency Services for the Police Department to acquire and replace parts of the Jaws of Life rescue equipment. On behalf of Procurement, we have Chief Adam Manny. Chief Manny, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Comptroller, Madam CA, honorable board members. We're asking you to approve this award to MES for the Jaws of Life. The reason this is a walk-on, it is funded from a state grant which expires at the end of the month, and we want to make sure we can use those funds to get this equipment.
Questions from the board? Mr. Comptroller?
Just how many Jaws is
I
53,000?
don't know. It's for both new equipment and for parts for old equipment also.
Okay, if you could just have somebody send that to Abby.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
We'll ask.
Or I guess we could just ask the BPD.
Yep.
Okay, we'll ask the BPD. Okay, never mind, thanks.
Come on up.
How's it going? I had a PowerPoint presentation, but my laptop died.
Oh, no. You just need to know how many.
Okay, so there's
And
two.
no, whoa, slow down. Your name and what you do.
My name is John Yu. I'm the fiscal administrator for the grants unit for the Baltimore Police Department.
Great.
And thank you for having us, honorable board members. So essentially, it's two Jaws of Life, and specifically for the MES, it's they're a sole source provider for the state of Maryland.
Two Jaws, thank you.
Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Manny? Seeing and hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving this item say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. The item is approved. Thank you, sir. The next item on the non-routine agenda is a walk-on item on behalf of the Department of Planning under SB 2511900. This is a request to approve a grant agreement with the Maryland Department of Agriculture to support food accessibility at farmers markets. On behalf of Planning, we have Deputy Director Smith. Director Smith, the floor is yours.
Good morning, honorable members of the board. For the record, my name is Stephanie Smith, and I serve as Assistant Director for the Department of Planning. I'm here before you with this walk-on request related to approval for a grant agreement that we're attempting to execute concerning our Healthy Food Priority Area funds. I think some of you are familiar with it. And this grant agreement would be with the Maryland Department of Agriculture. This is for support of the Maryland Market Money Program, which enables residents to use their federal food benefits and also receive a dollar-to-dollar match that will actually extend their purchases at area city farmers markets. The total amount of the award is $100,446. The reason for the delay is due to our fiscal staff being unexpectedly on leave that created a backlog. We have granted funds to this particular program in the past, and the program is going to be moving to the Maryland Department of Agriculture on July 1. So the goal was to have this grant already moving to them in advance of the move, and Secretary Addix for the Maryland Department of Agriculture is in support of this grant agreement and is the agreement signatory. So humbly request your approval of this grant agreement, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Comptroller?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'm going to join with the President in attempting to speak the deputy title into existence. It's not so much, it's only a question in that I think I have seen this program in action at local farmers markets. Okay, I just wanted to make sure this was the same thing, which has been great and wonderful, and I appreciate the planning department continuing to work to make that possible.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Just real quick, do we do this at all the farmers markets, or is it just under the bridge?
Baltimore City, only Baltimore City markets, but not just the one at the bridge, all of them, the 32nd, any.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Other questions? Hearing and seeing none, would entertain a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving this item say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The item is approved.
Thank you so much.
The next item on the non-routine agenda is a walk-on item on behalf of the Small and Minority Business Advocacy Development Office under SB 2511315. This item is to approve an agreement to expand access to capital for small businesses to address longstanding funding challenges and promote sustainable growth. On behalf of SMABAD, we have Chief Christopher Lundy. Hey, sir. Chief Lundy, the floor is yours. We got to work on the acronym, title. It's
We are working on it. We've been taking the market feedback of everybody. And
it's going to be SMABAD until we figure something out here.
No worries. But good morning to this honorable board. This item is a amendment to the agreement we have with Fuse Corps. This is going to allow us to have a Fuse Fellow in place for this fall until the fall of 26. They're going to be helping us with identifying access to capital resources and helping us build out our business ecosystem. And we're really excited about the work that's going to be taking place. And this was needed to get on this BOE so we could secure the subsidized funding. This is an agreement with Fuse where they cover, I believe it's $140,000 of the salary, and we're only covering $20,000. So we're going to have a high-level worker in on the team. And I have to thank Comptroller's team, Celeste, Casey, and especially Audrey for getting this to the board today.
Thank you, Director. Questions? Okay.
Move approval.
So moved. Is there a second? All those in favor of approving this item say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. This item is approved.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. The next item is a walk-on behalf of the Department of Housing and Community Development, SB 2511812. This is a request to approve a subrecipient grant agreement with Harbor West Collaborative Affordable Housing Land Trust, LLC. On behalf of DHCD, please introduce yourself and please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. President and honorable board members. My name is Wendy Redfern. I am the Deputy Commissioner for Development for DHCD. So today, I think we have a presentation.
Oh, do you really?
No, we don't need to.
Okay.
We don't need to. Okay. So DHCD is requesting
If you want to do a presentation.
No, I'm fine.
Sure?
I'm absolutely fine.
All right.
Thank you, though.
Okay.
So DHCD is requesting the approval of a grant agreement with Harbor West Collaborative Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The grant amount is $100,000, and the term is for 12 months. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund Community Land Trust operating program gives funds to our development partners so that they can build their capacity to continue to do work in disinvested communities. We released NOFA for FY24 in August of 23, and that release, the grantee submitted a response and application was determined that they satisfied the goals and objectives of the program, meaning that they could.
For many viewers at home, could you please define NOFA?
Notice of funding availability.
Thank you very much.
We got cash.
Yeah, sometimes. Okay. So we formalized the agreement and we're looking for approval today. This agreement took place in FY24. We asked for it to be walked on today because the organization is in desperate needs of the funds now. It was an oversight when the other agreements were approved. This one was to be included. Somehow it was not included.
Yeah.
And so once the grantee attempted to get a disbursement, it was discovered that this one actually did not technically get approved. So that's why we are here today, to move as quickly as possible to get those funds to them. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the board? And I'm sorry if I missed this for a brief moment. Why are we doing it this way as opposed to just
The normal way.
normal business?
Yeah, so it was an oversight originally.
Okay.
So there were, when the NOFA was issued, the other agreements came to the board in April of '24. This one should have came as well. It did not. When the grantee attempted to get a disbursement, we discovered that technically there was not board approval. So that's why we're here today, to make sure that we have board approval so that we can disperse the funds.
Got it. Questions? Hearing and seeing none. Do we have a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving this item say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The item is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As there is no more business before the board, we will now adjourn this meeting. The next regular meeting of the Board of Estimates will occur on Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025 at 9 a.m. I thank everyone for participating and being gracious and kind during this meeting. Thank you.
Hi, TV 25. I don't know, but I can ask. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Estimates bid opening for June 18th, 2025. I first am sharing that there are no addenda to read out today for the record. So there are, at this time, no changes to any upcoming scheduled bid openings. My team also wanted me to advise that I am opening bids today without wearing my glasses, so we might have more double checking of numbers going on than usual. Up first, for the Bureau of Procurement, we have RFQ 000684. Does that sound right, Casey?
Yes, ma'am.
See, I can read if the screen is far enough away. This is for repair and maintenance services for plumbing and heating systems, and I believe we have 3 bidders. And up first?
Yes, up first we have a bid from J.F. Fisher, Inc. We have 1 original and 1 flash drive and 2 duplicates.
Thank you.
The total bid amount is is.
You can just say the numbers today if you want to take the pressure off yourself.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not to it. 6,139,450 and 0 cents.
That first number was 6, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So, hold on. My laptop refuses to cooperate with that particular key. Okay. So that number was 6,139,450. And for folks trying to follow me, don't worry, I'm going to read that again.
Page B7.
Thank you. I'm not sure. Oh, I see why. that's not, that's the price sheet with just the name of the company, okay. Okay, this bidder is JF Fisher Incorporated, and the number is $6,139,450.00.
Outstanding work. You don't need your glasses anyways.
I put the dollar amounts in bold, and that helps.
Okay. Okay. The next bid is from BMC Services LLC.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanna look at- Why is this all done? That's on the addenda. I don't want to pull it from here. And the total bid price is 4,990.
Hold on, you tricked me by not telling me about flash drive originals
Oh,
and
I
copies.
apologize. There's one flash drive, one
Thank you.
original, and 2 duplicates. Thank you for
And 2
keeping me on my
duplicates.
toes.
It's okay. BMC Services LLC, and now you're going to give me the bid amount.
4,990, comma 900 and 0 cents.
Okay, that number was, may I see a copy, please?
Go to page B7.
Thank you.
Make it.
That number was 4, comma, $990,900.00.
That's correct.
Okay, that bidder was BMC Services LLC. Thanks, Sean. And the price, the bid amount was $4,990,900.00.
Okay. Our last bidder is JCM Controls Incorporated. I have 1 original, 1 flash drive, and 2 duplicates.
Okay.
Oh, this is adorable. But, oh, we can't look at it there. Okay, and the total amount is 7,104,750.
That number was 7, thanks. 7,104,750.00.
That's correct.
So that bidder was JCM Control Systems, Inc. for $7,104,750.00. Nice tabbing system. And that was our final of 3 bidders for RFQ 000684, and this was for the repair and maintenance services for plumbing and heating systems. Up next, also for our friends at procurement, is RFQ 000724. This is for an internet service provider for HBAC, I think that means HABC locations. Part A.
We have received no bids.
Okay, so let me explain to folks who are watching. That Part A generally means when a bid is 2 parts that we're getting qualifications, and then at some later point in time when we decide which qualifications we're satisfied with, we will then open the prices for those bidders. Today, unfortunately, we have not received any bids, which means we haven't received any qualifications or pricing to be opened at a later time. So that's very concerning. We're sure this was to be open today?
That was entered on the listing, yeah.
I believe you guys. Just checking, because it seems unusual that that would happen. But at any rate, we have not received any bids, qualifications or otherwise, for RFQ 000724, Internet Service Provider for HABC locations. Up next, for transportation, we have contract TR 25011. This is for ADA curb ramp construction, North Urgent Need. And we have 6 bidders, I believe. Are we starting with the copies and such before the bid amount?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have 1 original, 1 duplicate, and 2 duplicates.
For, who is this for?
And, oh, sorry, that would be great. I will.
E&R,
For
E&R Services.
Incorporated. They do have a bid bond.
Thank you. Oh, hold on, I'm going to put this in an unmarked column because I don't have one. So yes, there is a bid bond, which I see in this duplicate as well.
And the total amount listed on page 131.
Got it.
Is 1,602,240.
That amount was 1,602,240.00. Okay. That bidder was E&R Services, Inc. for $1,602,240.00. Up next.
Our next bid is from Priority Construction Corporation.
Okay.
We have 1 original and 1 duplicate.
Thank you. 1 and...
We have a signed
Oh, I'm sorry,
bid bond.
hold on just a second, please. I'm struggling to operate my keyboard today. We do have a bid bond?
Yes.
Thank you.
And reading the total off of page 131. $1,410,921.03.
3 cents. Okay, that number was 1,410,921.03. And that matches the copy. And that bidder was Priority Construction Corporation for $1,410,921.03. Thanks, Shay.
Our next bid is from DIR Construction Incorporated. We have 1 original and 1 duplicate. We have a signed bid bond.
Yep.
And reading the total on page 131 is $1,299,540.00.
Okay, that number was 1,299,540.00.
Correct.
Okay. That bidder was, DIR Construction, Inc. for $1,299,540.00.
Thank you. Charm TV, I just realized my mic was off. It's now on, but I hope you picked up what Celeste repeated.
Your voice carries is probably getting picked up on mine, too.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, our next bid is from J Villa Construction Incorporated. We have 1 original and we have 1 duplicate.
Thank you.
We do have a signed bid bond. And the total bid, reading off page 131, is $1,382,000. I'm
That
going
number?
to scratch that because I said it wrong. $1,382,000.
That's what I got.
Okay. All right.
That number is 1,382,000.00.
That's correct.
That bidder was J Villa Construction, Inc. for $1,382,000.00.
Okay. Next up, we have a bid received from Manuel Luis Construction Company Incorporated, or M. Luis. We have one original, we have one duplicate. And
I see a bid bond in my copy.
I have a signed bid bond. And the total bid amount is $1,337,234.30.
That number was 1,337,234.30.
Correct.
That bidder was M. Luis for $1,337,234.30. Thanks.
All right, the last bidder is from Paniagua Enterprises. A note to bidders, if we ever say your company's name wrong, you can always write to us and we will fix it.
Because we want to get them right. We really do.
I'm basing this reading off of someone I sat next to in 11th grade, but it could be a different pronunciation. Okay, I have a signed bid bond from Paniagua.
Okay.
And the total bid amount is $1,860,200.00.
Okay. That number was 1,860,200.00.
That's correct.
That bidder was Paniagua Enterprises, Inc. for $1,860,200.00. And I think that was our final of 6 bidders. Everybody's nodding. For TR 25011 for ADA curb ramp construction north urgent need. Urgent. And that concludes our bid opening for today, June 18th, 2025. Our next bid opening is in the new fiscal year, July 2nd, 2025 at noon, and we will see you all then. Thank you very much for tuning in, and thank you, TV 25.